In a quiet Russian town, the name Karamazov didn't bring comfort. At the center was Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, a man who had long outlived decency. He was rich, ridiculous, and shamelessly cruel. People laughed with him, but only out of fear. He had 3 sons. Dmitri, the eldest, fiery, reckless, desperate for justice and love. Ivan, the middle, cold-eyed, brilliant, burdened by questions. And Alyosha, the youngest, gentle, faithful, the only one who still believed peace was possible. They came together again after many years, summoned by inheritance, by rumors, by unfinished wounds. At the family home, the air was thick. Fyodor laughed and poured wine. "To my sons," he said, "one wants my gold, one my soul, and one nothing at all." Dmitri rose, furious. "You disgust me. You steal. You lie. You chase the woman I love just to hurt me." Fyodor only grinned. It wasn't the first time her name filled the room like fire. Grushenka, young, sharp, magnetic. She had drawn both father and son into a storm of desire and humiliation. "It's not my fault. Grushenka enjoys attention," Fyodor said, still grinning. Ivan said nothing. Alyosha tried to speak, but Dmitri was already gone. That night, Ivan walked with Alyosha in the cold. "Do you still believe in God?" he asked. "I do," Alyosha replied. "I believe in suffering, and I see no God who explains it." The words lingered. Alyosha said nothing. But as they walked through the snow, his thoughts turned elsewhere, to the one man whose faith had never wavered. Elder Zosima had been more than a monk to Alyosha. He was a guide, a quiet force, gentle, steady, deeply human. And Alyosha, more than anyone, had believed in him. A few days later, Zosima died. His body decayed too quickly, the faithful whispered. Some called it a sign of disgrace. Alyosha left the monastery in silence. That same evening, Fyodor sat drinking alone in the house. Dmitri was missing. Ivan stayed at the inn. Only the servant, Smerdyakov, moved in the shadows. A knock came. Fyodor opened the door. Dmitri stood there, soaked, shaking, his eyes wild. "What now?" Fyodor said. "Come to kill me, or just weep again?" Dmitri stepped inside. He didn't answer. The room went silent. The next morning, Fyodor was dead. Blood on the floor, skull crushed, wine glass shattered. Dmitri was arrested before nightfall. He didn't deny his hatred. He didn't deny his rage. But he said, "I didn't do it." Ivan returned days later, pale, distracted. He avoided the trial, avoided Alyosha, avoided everything. But one night, he walked to the edge of town. Behind the old orchard stood a small cottage. That's where Smerdyakov lived now, the former servant of the Karamazov house. He had always been quiet, soft-spoken, strange. Now he lived alone. Ivan sat across from him in the dim room. "I need to ask you something," he said. Smerdyakov didn't flinch. He simply said, "I killed him." Ivan froze. "You told me there's no God, that everything is permitted. So I acted accordingly." Ivan didn't speak. He couldn't. "You're not guilty of murder," Smerdyakov said. "But you gave me permission." Ivan stood, trembling. He walked out into the dark. That night, he collapsed with fever. In jail, Dmitri stared at the wall. "I always thought I was fighting my father," he told Alyosha. "But maybe I was only fighting myself." At the trial, Ivan did not appear. Alyosha sat in the back, silent. The verdict came quickly. "Guilty." Dmitri whispered, "Maybe this is justice, even if it isn't the truth." Smerdyakov took his life not long after. Ivan was moved to a hospital. His mind fractured. And Alyosha? He stayed. Not to argue the verdict, not to clear the family name. He simply stayed. He walked with the poor, sat with the sick. And one of those was a boy named Alyosha. They had met by accident weeks earlier when Alyosha threw a rock at him in the street. Alyosha didn't get angry. He smiled and came back the next day. Alyosha was just a boy, maybe 10. His father was a broken man, once humiliated by Fyodor Pavlovich. His friends avoided him, his pride kept him quiet. But Alyosha returned, day after day, telling him stories, reading to him, just sitting nearby when the pain was too much for words. When the end came, it was quiet. Alyosha gathered the boys from town, the ones who had once mocked Alyosha, now standing quietly at his grave. He didn't preach, he didn't cry. He just said, "Remember him, he suffered, but he loved you." And that's not something to forget. The boys listened, and that was enough. Later that evening, Alyosha walked alone to the old Karamazov estate. The windows were dark, the doors shut. The house had outlived the people who filled it. Alyosha turned and walked away. He didn't know what came next, but he knew what he would do. Stay, carry, forgive,